First of all, I hate the word iconic. It's literally the most overused word in our industry because there are literally only about 5 icons. God, I mean, obviously I'm going to say what everyone says, which would be, looking at Vogue. I went to boarding school, and when I would come back from boarding school, we lived in America, and I would come back from boarding school, and my dad would buy me American Vogue, and in the holidays I would go through every single page, every single advert, and just comb through it, back in the old days when it was this thick, and that's what I would literally do every holiday. So yeah, it was always Vogue for me. Not at the beginning, I don't think. I mean, I think I've always had an affinity for faces, but it wasn't really until I started working at the magazine that I really became interested in that. I think because it's not really something that I didn't have teared out pictures of the models on my wall or anything like that. It was more, for me, I had Stella jumping into the swimming pool. It was more fashion images that I was really drawn to rather than the faces back then. But that's maybe changed a little. My first ever sort of proper fashion thing that I ever did, I was an intern for Julien Macdonald. He's it's a Welsh fashion designer who shows in London. I'm not sure if you're familiar. And essentially I was hot gluing sequins onto gowns for a week. But then I got to go to the show, and I'd never been to a fashion show before, so I was thought it was singularly the most exciting thing that had ever happened to me, and Naomi Campbell was in it. And I literally I cried. I was literally backstage, I was the hairs on my neck, sort of my arms are standing up thinking about it, because it was so overwhelming and so amazing. It was very so glamorous, and the music and everything. And after that, I was sort of fully hooked. And I did a few more internships, and then I got an internship at Vogue, just in the fashion cupboard, and I was that ultra nerd. I was there all the time. They literally could not get rid of me, and I started to help the woman who's the bookings director alphabetize the model cards. In those days it was model cards that we always had, and rather than digital books, and she was obsessive about having every single model card and having them in alphabetical order. Because I was being a SWAT, I would stay and help her. And then eventually her assistant left and she gave me the job. So I got a job as a bookings assistant, and that was my first job at Vogue. We used to do these big stories with Mario Testino, and we did a story that was called Young London, and we were looking for lots of young British models, and I had one of my friends, which was Agyness Deyn, come in, and at that time she'd been kind of a jobbing model for a while, and she came to the casting. Mario loved her, and then Sam McKnight gave her that haircut, and so, I mean, she probably wouldn't even remember it now, but I was really pleased with myself. I think the benchmarks, for me, it's so much of it has been since Edward has been at Vogue, that literally changed everything for me, for so many people. I really think changed so much in the industry. Having worked at Vogue before, pre-Edward, which was also an incredible time at the magazine, but I would maybe be allowed to have one black model in an issue, maybe. It was not something that was really ever sort of done, and obviously that, and larger girls. I mean, I put Ashley Graham on a cover, but that was a big thing back then. And now, obviously with Edward, when Edward came in, all the rules went out the window, and it was just has felt like such a sort of freeing time, and I've really felt like I've been able to kind of really do I think my best work, because he gives me that freedom and has opened so many doors. So that has been a real moment, and things that we've done with him, the all black model cover, or, you know, a disability cover, and putting, you know, Jill, Paloma and Precious as the new supers was literally like, you know, another moment where I just sort of cried and cried when I saw the magazine myself. So those have been some really important moments for me personally. Then knowing about the other markets, I think I'm still learning. I think when I kind of started and doing this global role, I was like, oh yeah, this is, you know, I'm going to put this person on Italian Vogue, and then people in Italy were like, oh no, but you know, that doesn't quite work for us. And I was like, oh. You know, you kind of, then you have to listen, you really have to listen to them and listen to the people who are there. You know, we've got so many amazing people in each city, and you need to kind of understand what works. What you might think works for a market maybe just does not, and you've got to just sort of just listen, I think, and I'm sort of still trying to figure that out. I'm so personality driven, I have to say. Like, if I like a girl, if she makes me laugh, I'm like, oh, I love her. Let's hang out. And I think, you know, I'm so much less about, I've never been a casting director who can like tell you what someone's measurements are. I'm not like, oh, you know, she's like whatever on the hip, or she's like, oh, she's 1.81 meters. I'm like, you know, I don't think in that way. I'm like, oh, she's so fabulous. She can be this person, because I think that's what you get when you come from having started with a purely editorial background. It was, you know, when I first started casting at Vogue when I was an assistant, my boss, and at the time when we would start the season and we would talk about the story, she'd be like rubbing hands together, and you know, you were thinking like, who is the right girl for this story? And we would spend so long like thinking about it, like how, like, is it going to be like, is it Daria, or is it Freya, is it like this, you know, who's it going to, is it Rianne? And that was like such an exciting thing. What engaged me with the model is, yeah, totally, it's about their personality, and at the start of their career, just being on time. Punctuality. I mean, I myself am rarely on time, but I very much appreciate it in other people. And I think just like wanting to be there and being engaged, there's nothing worse than girls who like come and they clearly don't want to be there, or they've not maybe researched and they don't really know what they're doing maybe, and they're not kind of into it. And you can always tell the girls who are into it, the girls who want it, like, and are, you know, wanting to talk to everyone on set, like that's, you know, how you know you're like, oh, she's going to be a good model because she wants to be here. Well, you should, but people do not, you know. So many girls just don't, and they don't know who the photographer is, they don't know who the stylist is. And it's like, how can you go on set, and how can you be that person's muse for the day? How can you inhabit a character or do what you're supposed to be doing if you don't know, like, what kind of pictures they take? You know, do they take a more static picture? Do they take a more this? And you would be an infinitely better model if you knew. And it can be so overwhelming going onto a photo shoot, but again, you've got to be, if you're going to be the center of attention, you've kind of got to get on there and be like, introduce yourself to everyone and make sure everyone knows who you are, and so that you can know who everyone is and, you know, read the room. But again, it's a lot of pressure to put on, you know, a young girl who's walking into a room. As I said, it can be incredibly intimidating, but that's when you need the, you know, agents need to teach the girls and make them understand like how to hold a room, or how to interact, and who they need to be, you know, engaging with, I think. So that would be my tip, is do your research. I think it has to be both. It has to be both. You have to listen, again, to both sides. I mean, now, having been there for so long, I very much know like who I think is going to be, you know, who is like a Vogue girl, is it going to resonate for us? And it's about that push and pull with the photographer, making sure they're going to be excited about them. And sometimes if they're not excited about them, and if we know that we want to do something with that model, then it's not the right fit, and you need to kind of maybe change the team and do something different. First of all, I hate the word iconic. It's literally the most overused word in our industry, because there are literally only about like 5 icons. But I think tenacity, yes, definitely, because it is like, it's hard industry, and you've got to have, I think as a girl, you've got to have like,
also you need to kind of have like a bit of a hard shell. You can't be, it's tough for girls who are super sensitive, and that sometimes it's like, sometimes you can have a girl and she can be literally the most beautiful girl in the world and could be so amazing, but if it doesn't have the right kind of character for it, it's just not gonna happen for her, and maybe she shouldn't do it. Like, just because you are insanely beautiful does not mean that you should be a model, because you have to love fashion, you have to love interacting with people, and just you have to love being kind of center of attention as well. There are a lot of people who are incredibly beautiful but introverts. So I think there's it's fine, it's having that right balance of character. And yeah, of course, industry support is everything. You're not going to get anywhere if you're not getting booked by the right people and all of that. But I think also they need to know themselves more than anything. And I think more and more now, I don't like to work with young girls, because I much prefer to work with women. And at Vogue, when we it used to be that models had to be 16 and now they have to be 18, and I was so happy. Many agents get very upset about the 18 rule, but I'm like, for me it is absolutely perfect. She's not her, what I was like when I was 16, I was an absolute nightmare. I mean you couldn't have taken me anywhere or like expected me to like get on a plane or be in a room with all these people. I've literally just been, you don't even want to know. And so now, but like even 18 is still young. They're still, they're still so young. And I think you're infinitely better when you just have that more of a sense of self, and they're less likely to sort of come into it, be a disaster, and then, do a season and then you never see them again. It's like, let them be ready to work and to understand that it is work and that it can be a career, but you need to, be in the right place. Especially with what is expected of them now in terms of like their social media and what brands want from them. They need so much training before they can get to that point. But otherwise, they will make mistakes, and those mistakes live on in forever if it's captured on a thing. So it's just, they need to be in the right place, I think, and to have that support. It's given the consumer so much more power, like now there is more pressure to put girls on covers who have big followings. It used to be, I remember when when Italian Vogue used to come out, and they never credited the models in those days, it was, and you'd literally be like, and there wasn't even models.com back then, and so we would all be like, does anyone know who she is? Who is she? Who is she? Who is she? Like calling around, and then the one agent would be like, I have her, I know who she is, and then you would all like just be trying to find out who this new girl was that Stephen had shot, and that was like the thrill of the chase to kind of thing. And now you would never put a girl who no one knew who she was, and no one could find her, and not put her name on it. Like would be wild in today's landscape, right? Maybe we should do that. It actually sounds really fabulous. But I think, yeah, it has made it. I don't know if I like how it has changed it, because it just means everything is sort of so immediate and so seen, and everyone's so concerned with whether everyone likes it, so that it gives you like a little bit less freedom just to kind of make a beautiful image regardless of what it is. So I don't know if it's for the good. Be like, oh, have you got 2 Asian girls? Great, fine, you're done. Have you got 2 black girls? Okay, fine. Like now, it's just not the case, which is amazing and really as it should be. Yeah, because there's been this obviously an explosion of scouting into all of these other countries and through social media. So I agree. Social media for that is great, because also it means that these girls feel that much closer, and I think they, gives them more opportunities, which is good. It was amazing. We had 60,000 applicants, which myself and Iggy had to go through by ourselves. So that was sort of a fun week of going through that, and then we did a shoot with them all, and it was really amazing. It was such a fun day. Like, they were so excited. Again, it's like, it's so nice. It was so nice to be on set with them all, because they were so excited, every single one. And that kind of reminds you of, like, when you work with much more seasoned models, they're not excited. They're not excited. They're like, oh yeah, it's just another day for them. But for these girls, it was literally from the moment they like get on, they were like, just, it was such a vibe. It was really great fun. And I think there's one or two in there who are going to do really well. So I'm excited for them. How does that differ? I mean, it's sort of totally different because you're just working with one brand. So you have to you really kind of have to switch your head into okay, what does this designer want? What is their woman? And kind of just really make yourself, think in a very different way. And depending on what the stylist wants, and so it's totally different. But for me, I think it's quite good. It's quite nice to do something different like that. It's quite a good mental exercise, and it's good for me because it makes you look at lots of different girls that you might not look at. For Vogue, because at Vogue, if you've only got 4 stories in an issue, you're not going to maybe looking for brand new girls. But when you're doing shows and you come to different cities, you see lots of different girls, and seeing a girl in a casting, for me, when you're doing a casting with a designer, I get to know her so much better, especially, if you try her in a few outfits, and then you really kind of understand her body as well, and, her walk and how she moves in clothes that you don't get from just doing a go-see when someone comes in to see me, at the magazine. So for me, I find it really helpful. I guess also because I have this editorial background where it's really, it's always about having the right girl and really kind of, so we would wait for the right girl rather than just trying to kind of shoot. Models, I don't feel like they are disposable, and I don't want them to be. I want them to they're just as much, you can't have a great shoot without a great model, and you need to kind of, treat them as such. I love Molly Goddard is a personal favourite who I work with, who I think is just incredible. And Simone, all these really amazing female designers. Nancy de Jacquet is just, an incredible talent, and we're really all so lucky. I find them all really inspiring. I think I would say to listen a lot. And to really hear people. I think for casting, I think we're interpreters, or we're, I always kind of said that in my next life I'm going to come back as a sort of ambassador for the UN. It's all about negotiation, right? It's not about negotiating, fees, or it's about negotiating people's availability. It's about getting someone on board with someone else. So it's really, you've got to be a diplomat, I think, if you're in, to do the type of casting that I do. I'm not I'm not someone who really, I wouldn't say I dramatically push boundaries or look for kind of anything that's weird. I love to do just really, really beautiful girls in beautiful clothes. That's what I do. But I think it's all about listening to people and making sure that everyone feels heard, that the photographer feels heard, that the stylist feels heard, the designer feels heard, your editor feels heard. So, and giving them, listening to all of those voices first before you try and push something, and knowing when to push, knowing when to sit back. It's all about that. It's about reading the room on a wider scale, I think. Maybe I should be in the limelight. Get my own show, guys. Come on. People want to see